Welcome to the Fantasy Audiobook. Marvel. Open the box to become stronger. Chapter 61. 3 things. One of them was a sword, a very gorgeous sword, as if it was made of ice, with an ice crystal as bright as a star in the hilt. At the first sight, even Lu Chen could not help but sigh at the appearance of this sword. However, after a moment, with the influx of information from the dark, Lu Chen's eyes twitched fiercely. Frostmourne, fake, this is a lonely ice sword, where thoughts are magnified, souls are reborn in depravity, and disasters are rampant in sorrow. It cannot be stopped, and can only be destroyed. It is as light as a feather, as cold as ice, about 5 feet 2 inches long, and weighs 3 kilograms. Its endless power constantly attracts those who have not fallen, but it prefers those who are extremely miserable, giving them the power to avenge the world, causing the world to fall and disaster to come. Ability. Even if this is not the real Frostmourne, its power is unquestionable. No matter who touches it, its strength will be doubled. However, the person holding the sword will inevitably be swallowed by the cold, not only the body, but also the soul, until it is frozen forever. Note, therefore, please do not draw the sword too much, it is not something that the world can control. A very strong sword, and it is not just ordinary strong. Even if, as the mysterious information says, this sword has a strong backlash, it is enough to make anyone's heart beat. Especially a woman like Molly who controls ice. Slowly raising his eyes, Lu Chen saw the girl with long ice blue hair walking in front of Frostmourne, fake. After a moment, he raised his arm tremblingly, and then slowly held. Zera, zera. One after another, the crisp sound spread like a cold current, and the whole store was covered with frost. What was even more shocking was that a blizzard was also coming. Lu Chen's pupils shrank, and he opened his hand. Gravity rebounded. With a whisper, the purple halo continued to ripple, and finally opened up a field of vision visible to the naked eye in the snowstorm. At this moment, in Lu Chen's sight, Mo Li was already holding a long sword, but her right arm was condensed into countless ice stains. Does this sword have a name? Yes. Nodding, Lu Chen slowly said, Frostmourne, this is its name. I like it very much. The corner of her mouth slightly raised, and the cold girl couldn't help but reveal a smile. Very beautiful. Really, very beautiful. It was as if she was at the top of the Arctic, and the icy blood flowing in her body began to become active. It was only a few breaths, and her strength seemed to be infinitely rising. However, at this moment, a rare reminder suddenly sounded in her ears. This is a magic sword, I don't recommend you to use it too much. After a slight pause, Molly showed a rare look of doubt. Magic sword. Yes, the magic sword, with your body, 3 times should be the limit. After 3 times, the surging power of this magic sword will completely freeze your body and even your soul, and then it will shatter into dust. After pondering for a moment, Lu Chen gave Mo Li a fairly accurate number according to the information in the dark. After all, it is a fake, and 3 times is its limit. 3 times. Her eyes narrowed slightly, and Molly took a deep look at the blue, frost-like long sword in her hand. Indeed, although the feeling was vague, she also felt the coldness coming from the sword, not the coldness of the body, but the coldness of the heart. However, even so, it was enough. Using it 3 times was enough for her to reverse the situation. If she couldn't reverse it, it could only be said that her defeat was doomed, and at that time, what was the point of having this sword? Thinking of this, Molly also clenched it slightly. A moment later, with the surge of ice, the sword had been taken into her body. She had an incredible control over ice. And like now, freezing Frostmourne and then taking it into the body is a deeper use of the glacier path, involving a certain spatial level. Unfortunately, this method can only be carried by ice, and the object cannot be too large, otherwise, she would have a good storage capacity. And just after Molly put away the magic sword, her eyes slowly moved to another object. What is this? Picking up a soap-like thing, Mo Li was also curious. Soap, as white as ivory. What is the use of this thing? Let me take a bath. With a suspicious look on her face, Mo Li had already drawn her eyes to Lu Chen. However, Lu Chen's face froze the moment he saw the soap, and his eyes were involuntarily drawn to Mo Li's most perky part. Obviously, for some special reasons, he had thought of something that was not suitable for children. However, at this moment, as Lu Chen watched, information about this soap also flooded into Lu Chen's mind. Super soap, a magical invention from another world. Introduction. Any skin that is rubbed by this soap will be invulnerable to weapons and jade. Note, it is worth mentioning that the power of this soap will only last for 1 hour, so if you want to catch a knife with your bare hands, please calculate the time. Cough. With a dry cough, as if to cover up his embarrassment, Lu Chen decisively withdrew his gaze. Although the girl's part was indeed very perky, it didn't seem to be what he should focus on. Moreover, more importantly, he had already noticed a very suspicious look, as if saying, "What are you doing? Let me tell you, this piece of soap of yours is not just a good thing." In order to change the subject, Lu Chen spoke very quickly this time. At this time, hearing Lu Chen's voice, Mo Li also chose to ignore the strange look just now, took a look at the white soap in her hand, and then hesitated and said, "Good stuff. Yes, it's a good thing. You only need to rub your body with this soap when you take a shower, and your body will be invulnerable and as smooth as jade." Really? Her eyes lit up, and Mo Li showed a hint of surprise on her face. It wasn't that she was invulnerable, but that she looked like jade. That kind of skin is probably what every girl dreams of. Skin with jade texture is exciting just to think about. Moreover, it is invulnerable to swords and guns, and cannot be hurt by sharp weapons. I believe no girl can refuse such power, right? With a slight pursed lip, Mo Li had already picked up the soap and wiped her slender and long fingers. After a moment, her fingers trembled slightly, bringing out a layer of frost. For her who controls ice, washing with frost is not a strange thing. Not long after, the frost was wiped off, and in Mo Li's surprised eyes, what was revealed was exactly as Lu Chen said, like jade, with a touch of crystal color. "It's really good." Molly's lips curled up slightly in the difficult praise. Then, she pulled with her left hand and brought out a blue ice cube that looked like a sharp blade. "Don't let me down." As if talking to herself, Molly had already thrust the blue ice cube into the back of her hand. Crack, a crisp sound suddenly echoed in the air. However, surprisingly, pieces of broken ice had already splashed in the air. At this time, looking at the back of Molly's hand, she suddenly found that there was not even a white mark. Really invulnerable to swords and guns. As if confirming something, Molly's eyes showed a hint of joy. In this way, she only needs to rub this soap all over her body, and she will have a good close-range trump card. You know, although the ice bloodline is powerful, as the store manager said, the ice bloodline gives the ability to control the cold current. To a certain extent, it is the so-called long-range mage. As for close combat, although Molly is not weak, it is far behind the long range. That is why she was unable to do it when the Hydra organization was pulled in front of her. Otherwise, with her means, the result is really hard to say. However, now, looking at the crystal color on her palm, Molly showed a meaningful smile on her face. "If it is the next time, I should give you a big surprise." Just a moment, before Molly could think more, a voice that was about to say something made her face stiff. The effect of this super soap seems to last only 2 hours. 2 hours. In the intermittent voice, Lu Chen saw with his own eyes that the girl's face changed again and again. Her momentary stiffness and the faintly murderous eyes made Lu Chen's mouth twitch. He was talking halfway, it shouldn't be his fault. It should be. Feeling the somewhat complex eyes, Lu Chen decisively picked up the third jar shrouded in golden light. "This thing is really good." Oh, listening to Molly's simple and almost numb response, Lu Chen also took a deep look at the super soap that seemed to have been squeezed and deformed. Fortunately, this soap was specially made and would not be destroyed by brute force. Otherwise, it would be a pity to have such a pretentious artifact. However, to be honest, her third item is really good. Thinking of this, Lu Chen's eyes were also drawn to a strange mask in his hand. Mask again. But unlike the previous weird clown mask, this mask in Lu Chen's hand is really good. Ghost Shadow Mask. A very magical mask that summons the Ghost Shadow core at the cost of calling on the darkness deep in the heart. Introduction. The Ghost Shadow core is a very scary core. They are tireless, capable, loyal and can move without hindrance. It can be said to be the most ideal core. Note, although this core is powerful, it is only one of the 9 Ghost Shadow core after all. At the same time, with the continuous summoning of soldiers, the inner darkness will continue to awaken. Believe me, the awakening of the inner darkness is not a good experience. He took a deep look at the mask in his hand. If Lu Chen remembered correctly, this should be the mask for summoning the Helmet Shadow Core. The Helmet Shadow, also known as the Samurai Core, has a strong ability to resist wearing armor, and the Shadow Samurai swords in their hands are indestructible weapons that can easily cut an iron barrel in half. If it weren't for the low sensitivity, the grade of this core would have to rise several levels. At this time, after taking a look at Molly, who seemed not very interested, Lu Chen also smiled. Then, in front of Molly's astonished gaze, he put the mask on his face. Da! With a crisp sound, the darkness spread in an instant. Then, in Molly's unbelievable eyes, figures wearing armor and holding samurai swords emerged from the darkness. This is Helmeted Shadow Core, the power of this mask. As he said this, Lu Chen also took off the mask with his backhand and handed it to Mo Li. But at this time, what Mo Li did not notice was that Lu Chen's eyes were rarely alert. Summoning the darkness deep in the heart is really not a joke. Just by putting it on, Lu Chen felt a little agitated, and a rare impatience rose, as if something was about to wake up. Fortunately, Lu Chen's spiritual attribute is really a bit high. Now it is as high as more than 200. Although it has some credit for the gravity fruit, the spiritual attribute of 200 is really extraordinary. Just a thought has suppressed the evil thought. Soon after, just as Lu Chen guessed, people wearing armor and holding samurai swords emerged from the darkness. No more, no less, exactly 10. Moreover, just when Mo Li was wearing a mask and preparing to summon the 10th, her figure shook slightly, and her whole aura changed. Fortunately, a chill suddenly came from nowhere and woke the girl up. Frostmourne. With a rare sigh of gratitude, Molly quickly took off the somewhat evil mask. Manager, can't your store produce some reliable things? In her rare complaint, Mo Li couldn't help but spit. Up to now, although the things that have come are indeed powerful, the side effects are really unparalleled. One after another, they erode the mind and change the mind. If this continues, Mo Li will doubt whether she will still be her next time. At this time, listening to Mo Li's complaints, Lu Chen also kindly reminded, "You don't have to." Rejected, Molly said decisively. She put away the ghost mask. It must be said that although this mask is a little weird, its power is beyond words. Summoning a legion, and a terrifying legion that is tireless, not afraid of death, and can travel through the darkness. If she had obtained this power earlier, there would not be the Hydra. Her face turned cold, and thinking of this, Molly's heart was also blocked. However, fortunately, she seemed to have come to the right place. This store gave her another very good surprise. After wandering around the store for a while, Molly did not stay for long. Now, she is still being hunted. Although she is no longer afraid, she still feels a little nervous when she sees this mysterious store manager. What if that group of guys finds this place? Question mark. Who knows if they will open a few cans? At that time, it will be a lot of fun. Therefore, after staying for only a few minutes, Mo Li chose to leave. Not long after Mo Li left, Lu Chen narrowed his eyes slightly, and a playful look appeared on his face. Ghost Army. Tisk tisk, what a great ability. Thinking of this, Lu Chen rarely spoke. How many points are needed to redeem the ghost mask? Accompanied by a cold reminder tone, the system's voice also sounded in Lu Chen's ears. Ding, since this is the first time the host has opened the points exchange jar for items, a great discount can be granted, only 20 points are required. Great discount, 20 points. With a suspicious sound, Lu Chen silently pulled to his awakening panel, looking at the current points column, which showed 80 points, and decisively chose to give up. It was not easy to save up 80 points, and earn another 20 points to open the second jar. Now, it is really not worth it to exchange for a ghost mask. And more importantly, Lu Chen also thought of a key point. System, can this first discount be retained? Ding, okay. Hearing this response, Lu Chen was also slightly relieved. In this case, the wait was worth it. In the future, if there are items that can greatly improve strength, it will not be too late to exchange them. After all, with a large discount amount, it is better to use it to buy something with higher value. In this way, he can make a lot of money. Of course, the system will definitely not lose money, that is. However, at this moment, a corner that Lu Chen didn't know. Boom! With a heavy bang, a figure flew backwards. However, looking at the figure that tore the sea apart, raised several meters high waves, and was still flying backwards, I am afraid no one would dare to regard him as a human. After all, if a person is subjected to such an impact, even if the body does not explode into blood mist, it will be fatal in an instant. However, looking at the figure in the distance, except for the incredible scream, there is nothing wrong with it. Hulk, what did you eat? It must be fake. Even though I am a little fat, I can't be hit so far by your punch. And what the hell is this severe pain? Rubbing his chest, the figure suddenly paused. Then, crack, like a flash of lightning, the figure was pulled onto a beach in an instant. However, looking at this middle-aged man with a big beer belly, the Hulk suppressed the twitching of his eyes and said, "This is the ability I gained in that mysterious shop." The Hulk, Dr. Banner, slowly raised his right fist. Looking up, a stream of black air actually enveloped his huge fist. Its substantial black color revealed a metallic texture. Ha! With his mouth wide open, Thor put the beer in his hand to his mouth again and took a big sip. Then, he came to the Hulk with a burp and sneered. "You must be kidding me, how could such a store exist?" Thor shook his head like a rattle. One moment, the rejuvenating pill, the next moment, summoning others, and now there is this weird black gas of yours. What a joke, if there really is such a store, how could I not know about it, with my 1,000 years of experience in fighting? You don't know either. Dr. Banner narrowed his eyes slightly, and his pupils shrank. Obviously, he had not expected this. Even Thor, the most knowledgeable member of the Avengers, knew nothing about the store. I'm afraid it's a little unbelievable. However, before Dr. Banner could ponder more, Thor suddenly laughed, then patted the Hulk's chest and said with a smile, "Dude, even if you want to pull me back, don't fool me with this kind of store, okay? Although I don't know how you created this black airflow, it's still far from threatening me." Thunder God Thor sighed like this, and gulped down another sip of beer, then turned around and staggered towards his home. However, at this moment, a faint voice suddenly came from behind him. "Did you know that I used less than half of my strength just now?" Quote. His face suddenly froze, and the middle-aged man with a beer belly froze in an instant, as if petrified. I don't know how long it took, but the Hulk heard a sound of swallowing saliva. "Gulu, are you sure you are not kidding?" He seemed to be in disbelief and seemed to find it incredible. "No." With a rare hint of amusement on his face, Dr. Hulk Banner raised his fist. "Want to try my real fist? My friend." With a boom, the invisible became visible, and countless black air currents had already flowed out of Dr. Banner's body. In just a moment, a right arm shrouded in darkness and with a metallic texture appeared in Thor's unbelievable eyes. And, at this moment, an unimaginable pressure seemed to stir the night sky, and even the thick clouds in the night sky became a little heavier. There is nothing better than a dark cloud pressing down on a city. Dude, be gentle, okay? Thor's eyelids twitched as he watched the burly figure approaching slowly, step by step, from a distance. He didn't know why. He felt a little uneasy when he saw the Hulk's right arm, which seemed to be covered with a layer of black metal. Not just a little bit, but a strong sense of uneasiness. At first, he didn't notice the horror of those wisps of black air. But now, just looking at him, he felt a lot more sober, and a chill came from behind him. However, before he could say more, the Hulk's Dr. Banner's laughter suddenly came over. "Don't worry, with your body that can withstand the energy of stars and force the furnace to open, how can you not withstand my punch?" In a voice that seems to be smiling, Dr. Banner also wants to see the current strength. And Thor is exactly the perfect choice. You know, this guy used Stormbreaker to split the rays of Thanos' 6 Infinity Stones and severely damaged Thanos with one blow. Such an existence, although it looks increasingly decadent, its strength will definitely not decline too much. Thinking of this, the Hulk Dr. Banner also fixed his eyes. Come. After saying this, the Hulk's right fist, which was wrapped in black, suddenly pulled out. Boom, exploded like thunder, and a straight punch hit Thor's chest. However, just as the Hulk swung his fist, boom, with a terrible roar, Visible wind pressure was brought out. What made the Hulk's pupils shrink was that his punch actually blasted out a tornado several meters thick and shaped like a funnel. Not good. Shocked, the Hulk punched Thor subconsciously as he looked at him in the tornado. It was unexpected. Far from expected. He could actually punch out such a punch. How could it be possible? Even he was a little bit unbelievable. However, before he could put away the remaining strength, a solemn voice suddenly echoed in the night sky. "Don't hold back, let me feel it." As he said this, the middle-aged uncle with a beer belly, who was often seen in the crowd, slowly opened his arms. His hair, which had not been washed for a long time, was like a twisted whip, dancing wildly in the wind. However, at this moment, click, 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 one lightning bolt after another suddenly appeared at the end of the sea, weaving a silver electric net. What was even more shocking was that a lightning bolt as thick as a bucket was like a beam of light pointing directly at Thor. "I am the thunder god." With a roar, the man who looked like a middle-aged uncle had blue lightning flashing in his eyes. "You are back." Dr. Banner smiled, which was rare. He laughed very happily and loudly. At the same time, he clenched his fists again. Crack, accompanied by the sound of fists clenching, the tornado that had already dissipated suddenly swelled again, expanding several times in an instant. And in this shocking momentum, the sea in the distance has already raised waves tens of meters high. The waves and the lightning in the sky intertwined, as if it was the end of the world, but it truly depicted the most powerful two superheroes on the entire Earth today and the most terrifying strength. At this time, with a loud bang, Dr. Banner's inky black fist landed on Thor's chest. Wow! The Hulk's pupils suddenly shrank in the unexpected sound. However, in a moment, in his stunned eyes, Thor's face froze, as if he had seen something incredible. What was even more suffocating was that the silver lightning lingering around him suddenly dimmed. "Trust you!" Before the Hulk could even exclaim. Boom! With a terrible roar, Thor, the god of thunder, shot towards the end of the sea like a cannonball. Bang, bang, bang. The waves were pierced through in an instant, leaving the Hulk dumbfounded. However, the only thing to be thankful for was that he finally heard a familiar voice. "Are you kidding me? Are you cheating? This black airflow that I have seen before actually broke my defense. I was never this embarrassed when I beat Thanos." Amidst the shouts, a figure slowly walked out of the sea. However, what made people twitch their eyes was that the clothes of this figure had been completely torn, revealing a body that people dared not look directly at. Of course, that was not the point. The point was that there was a very deep fist mark on his chest. "I'm glad you're okay. Ha ha, how could I be in trouble? I am the god of thunder." The middle-aged man laughed out loud with a grin on his face. However, as a companion, the Hulk clearly noticed that Thor was not in good condition, and his expression kept changing. Especially when he saw Thor's right arm, he subconsciously avoided his gaze. As the punch heavy, hearing the seriousness in the Hulk's tone, Thor's face changed slightly, and then his eyes were drawn to the Hulk's right arm, which was wrapped in black and revealed a metallic texture, and he said in a low voice, very heavy, sinking like a mountain. According to the store manager, this is armament hockey. The stronger the physique, the more terrifying the armament hockey that is cultivated. With a serious face, the Hulk said seriously. Well. His face froze slightly, and Thor subconsciously touched his chest. No wonder it was so scary. The stronger the physique, the stronger the power. And the Hulk's body is equivalent to a monster. After all, this guy's body is one of the few terrifying guys who can rely on his body to compete with Thanos. Call. Thor took a deep breath and his face became solemn. Although I don't know the information of that store, but according to what you said, its existence is really too disturbing. Yes, uneasy. Nodding, the Hulk took out a book from his back and said in a deep voice. Compared to this armed color domineering, what I care more about is the story told in this book. With a little doubt, Thor took the book handed over by the Hulk. He quickly flipped through a few pages, and his pupils shrank to the size of a needle tip. This, in a rare moment of disbelief, Thor's face changed drastically. After a long while, Thor closed the book in his hand again, looked at the night sky, and sighed. Originally, I was already in despair. Why did you still give me hope? What's wrong, Thor? Hearing the Hulk's rare concern, Thor waved his right hand. Swish! A flash of lightning suddenly fell from the sky. Then, Thor, the god of thunder, clenched his hand, and an axe carrying lightning was already in his hand. I saw hope in this book. Thunder's face was full of indescribable complexity as he sighed deeply. Thanos, maybe you were really the savior. But I don't agree with your methods. Thinking of this, Thor was thinking about walking outside the beach. Late at night, the street lights flickered like ghost lights, sometimes bright and sometimes dim. The night was like a black hood, covering people's heads, so heavy and hideous. Especially when they accidentally caught a glimpse of a small house located between two high-rise buildings not far away, passers-by were even more afraid to miss it. After all, in such a depressing weather, the small house was like the devil's open mouth, which was very frightening. Listening to the trees on both sides of the road swaying back and forth in the wind, making babbling sounds, passers-by couldn't help but speed up their pace and leave quickly. How come this shop is still there? Oh, it's been more than half a month, it's scary. I heard that someone went in and found that they were selling jars for $100,000. So expensive, how could anyone buy it? The rare conversation was finally drowned by the night, leaving only the shop with dim lights shining but the door closed. At this moment, two figures came from nowhere and walked into the shop. Step, step, step. With heavy steps, the whole street seemed to be shrouded in a layer of oppression, and an unintentional momentum filled the whole street. However, after a moment, the two figures paused. One of the figures even fixed his eyes, looking suspiciously at the mysterious figure walking out from the direction of the store. Although she was also covered in a black robe, her slender figure could not be concealed even by the black robe. What was even more surprising was that from afar, a chill had already come from this figure. As if it was made of ice and snow, there was an inexplicable chill. Who is she? Thunder, who was shrouded in robes, was also suspicious in the rare doubt. Although the perception was not obvious, he still noticed the extraordinariness of this slender figure. If there were no accidents, it should be extraordinary. At this time, Dr. Banner also took a deep look at this figure, and a hint of thought flashed in the depths of his eyes. After a moment, as if he remembered something, he said in a deep voice, "Is she most likely the Ice Girl?" Ice Girl. Dr. Banner nodded and explained in a low voice. Ice Girl, a customer who walked out of the store, but this guy was ruthless and extremely cold-hearted, and had killed many people. Listening to Dr. Banner's narration, Thor grinned. HMPH. He snorted coldly and rushed out in an instant. That's perfect. But before he could rush to the figure, as if he had sensed something, the darkness around the figure suddenly surged. What was even more incredible was that a group of figures holding samurai swords emerged from the darkness and instantly appeared in front of Thor. Swish, swish. The silver blade light was sharp, which made Thor look impatient. Just a bunch of random soldiers. With a murmur. Crack, accompanied by the splash of lightning, the silver arc of electricity covered the ninja figures like a silver snake. However, in a moment, in the stunned eyes of Thor, these figures turned into wisps of black smoke as if vaporized. My power has increased. Thunder God was also suspicious in the stunned voice. But before he could think about it, a reminder suddenly sounded in his ears. Be careful. Upon hearing this, the Thunder God's pupils shrank subconsciously. He looked up and suddenly found that the figure with a very beautiful figure had grasped a long sword that seemed to be made of ice. Freeze, cold current. A cold voice suddenly sounded on the street. Then, in the stunned eyes of Thor, the whole street was covered with white frost in an instant. What made his scalp tingle was that the white frost continued to spread, and in the blink of an eye it was already in front of him. Call. Before they even touched, the chill that seemed to freeze his soul had already made the Thunder God hug his chest and shudder. However, after a moment, he gritted his teeth and stretched out his hand. Crack! A bolt of lightning as thick as a bucket fell straight from the sky, with a sharp sound of breaking through the air. Looking closely, one could see that it was actually an axe that was spinning continuously with the power of thunder. Bang! The intersection of frost and lightning, one cold, one hot, instantly raised a white mist all over the sky. And in the midst of the terrifying collision, a cold voice suddenly came from the depths of the white mist. Thor, I will remember you. The cold voice carried a trace of unforgettable. HMPH. It was still a cold snort, but Thor's pupils shrank rarely. The figure in the depths of the white fog had disappeared without a trace. What was even more incredible was that even the breath had completely dissipated. "You're running really fast." Thor stretched his body and looked at the ice cubes falling from his body. He was rarely solemn. At the moment when the icy sword pointed at her, he smelled a hint of danger. Although it was very faint, he had to admit that the young girl seemed to be a threat to him. At this moment, deep in a dark alley, an ice sculpture slowly cracked. Click, click. With one sound after another, Molly's figure slowly walked out of the ice. However, what was surprising was that Molly's face looked particularly ugly at this time, and even her breath was a little weak. It was really a ghost. She actually ran into the famous superhero, Thor. She didn't take it seriously at first, but the moment the lightning appeared, she had already recognized this superhero. Fortunately, when this figure rushed over, she had already sensed a fatal crisis and quickly pulled out Frostmourne fake. Otherwise, with her strength, let alone escaping safely, it's good enough that she didn't lose her life there. Thinking of this, Molly's eyes turned cold. According to what the store manager said, the 3 chances of Frostmourne were wasted, just like this. Molly clenched her fists and turned around again, looking in the direction of the store. Then, she sighed slightly and walked slowly in one direction. At this moment, a pair of eyes looked through the window of the shop on the 2nd floor. However, with the protection of the mysterious power of the shop, even the Hulk and Thor did not notice Lu Chen's gaze. Is it coming so soon? With a smile in his heart, Lu Chen was also a little speechless. What he didn't expect was that the ice girl, who had just gone out not long ago, actually bumped into these 2 big guys, level figures. He felt a little distressed, but also felt a little funny. However, with his eyes slightly narrowed, Lu Chen looked at the frost that had spread hundreds of meters on the street, and the scorched land turned into by Thor's lightning, and it was rare for his eyes to show a thoughtful look. With his current strength, he should be able to suppress Molly holding Frostmourne. As for Thor, sorry, this one is really unshakable. You know, this guy once borrowed the technology of Iron Man and the property of vibranium to diffuse energy to summon giant lightning and smash the entire city with one blow. Although such a wide range of offensives was due to the use of vibranium, it was definitely not something that Lu Chen could achieve now. However, at this time, as if he had thought of something, Lu Chen's mouth curled up slightly. Strength, after all, is cultivated slowly, and it is better not to eat a big fat man in one bite. Moreover, it is worth mentioning that the arrival of Thor now has given him another very excellent guest. Tap tock tock. The door of the shop was shaking repeatedly amidst the rapid knocks. Fortunately, Zor and Alger were not there at the time, otherwise the 2 guys would have picked up their knives and started fighting. It was closed at night, who would open the door to do business? However, they had already gone out, leaving Lu Chen alone. And Lu Chen was still very courteous to this special guest. Slowly opening the door, a figure in black robes staggered and almost fell down. Is this the current Thor? With a suspicious look, Lu Chen also looked at this impatient man with a beer belly that could not be covered by his robes. Cough. Thor coughed dryly, and as if to attract attention, he immediately turned his gaze to Lu Chen. Are you the store manager? Yes. Lu Chen nodded and said with a smile. Welcome, Thor, and, as he spoke, Lu Chen's gaze turned to the burly figure behind the Thunder God. Welcome again, Dr. Banner. Haha, here I come again. Lifting the brim of his hat, Dr. Banner, the Hulk, showed a very honest smile. And after a moment, as if he remembered something, Dr. Banner patted Thor's shoulder with his big hand. Bang, bang. Thor's face twitched during the continuous beatings. Don't you know how strong you are? If it were someone else, you would kill him in a few hits. At this time, Dr. Banner did not notice Thor's face. He took out a card from his bag and said, Here, there is $100,000, give this guy a jar. Taking the card, Lu Chen also half-jokingly said, You don't come with a jar anymore. No, no. He waved his hands quickly, and Dr. Banner's face became serious. Not to mention the money, just the armed color domineering now is hard for me to digest. Tisk tisk. Lu Chen smiled and did not dissuade him. Banner was indeed smarter than others. As for the ice girl, although she was not bad, she had already gone to an extreme. It was just that Lu Chen was not very clear about the ice girl's personality before, and he could not figure out how much the girl's personality had changed. But one thing was certain, if you were familiar with the ice girl's personality before, you would definitely be surprised by her changes. And this was the horror of not knowing one's own ability. Of course, Lu Chen would not remind you of these. At this moment, Thunder God, who had been observing Lu Chen for a long time, could not help but mutter. Can you really get anything out of this jar? Anything? Lu Chen smiled and teased, what are you referring to? Upon hearing this, the middle-aged uncle who had already lifted the brim of his hat was also rarely stunned. What are you referring to? As if the magic sound filled his ears, these words kept circling in Thor's mind. After just a moment, as if he thought of something, a trace of grief appeared on his face. Too many regrets have made him so gloomy today. His younger brother, the evil god Loki, died tragically in front of him, strangled to death by Thanos. His friend Heimdall was stabbed in the chest by Thanos and died tragically. And his sister Hela died under the giant sword of the fire giant. And there is also, his parents were also both dead. It can be said that it was all these tragedies that made him, the god of thunder, so lonely. Before, he couldn't even find his enemy, Thanos, so how could he take revenge? He could only drink alone, in a daze, tasting the bitterness of the name, tragedy. However, all this is coming to an end. Thanos is about to be found. And this news was brought to him by Dr. Banner. The Hulk, Natasha, the Black Widow, has already grasped the whereabouts of Thanos and is just waiting for him to reunite. It is for this reason that this king who has already fallen, once again raised the battle axe in his hand and stepped out of that very remote place. And now, staring at the black-haired figure in the distance, Thor's eyes are firm and unshakable. If you can, please give me the power to defeat Thanos. Quote. In the rare silence, Lu Chen looked at the flashing lightning of Thor, the god of thunder, and was absent-minded. Is this guy still longing for revenge? However, it is true that a kind-hearted person like him can swing his axe and chop off others' heads in the future. It is conceivable how deep the seeds of hatred are buried in this guy's heart. Lu Chen smiled and nodded, reminding, remember your mood at this moment, the jar will respond to you. As he said this, Lu Chen slowly turned around. At this time, Thor was also staring at Lu Chen's pottery jar. As for what the Hulk said at the beginning, to pay attention to Lu Chen and see if he could find anything, he had already forgotten it. Compared to Lu Chen himself, the jar in front of him was what he desired the most. Compared to revenge, compared to taking back everything he had lost, many things were insignificant. And this jar was likely to give him real power. Just like the Hulk's armed color domineering, he only needed to gain new power to defeat Thanos and take back what he had lost. Quote. There was a rare silence. The Hulk beside him looked at Thor, who was in a strange state at the moment, and stroked his forehead fiercely. What on earth was he doing? He actually brought Thor here. With this guy's current state, let alone paying attention to this mysterious store manager, it was already good enough for him not to get involved. However, before the Hulk banner could say anything, Lu Chen had already handed the jar to Thor. Your desire determines everything in the jar. Hearing Lu Chen's voice, Thor gritted his teeth for once, and his breathing became a little rapid. Strong desire. He clenched his fists, and Thor slowly took the jar. Can it really give me strength? Not to mention strength, even something as nearly impossible as resurrection, she can do it. The pupils suddenly shrank to the point of a needle, and Thor was shocked. Not only Thor, but also the Hulk. Dr. Banner beside him also changed his face. Are you kidding me? Dr. Banner swallowed his saliva while interfering. No. Lu Chen shook his head slowly, his face full of amusement. I told you, everything is possible. The reason why you don't understand is just because you are standing at a different height. During the rare explanation, Lu Chen looked at the incredulous expressions on the faces of the Hulk and Thor, and smiled in his heart. Even if you are a superhero, you still have weaknesses and desires. So, some things are already destined. However, resurrection is still a bit unbelievable in the Marvel Universe. Even the Emperor of the Universe, Thanos, would be moved when hearing this. What's more, Thor, who grew up in tragedy. At this time, Liu Chen observed carefully and found that this middle-aged man was like a child, with a hint of moisture in the corners of his eyes. It was light and shallow, but it easily blurred his vision. I should, do it. In a rare trembling voice, Thor looked at the pottery jar in his hand with an indescribable complexity. It's very simple, you just need to smash it open. After responding, Liu Chen seemed to remember something and added. By the way, the clay pot responds to your heart. It will respond to what your heart desires. Is that so? Thor gritted his teeth and exhaled deeply, as if to calm his heart. I don't know how long it took, but as if he had made a decision, a firm look flashed in the depths of Thor's eyes. Please. With a murmur in my heart, the pottery jar fell to the ground. Gotcha. Amidst the crisp sound of shattering, a very rich golden light suddenly bloomed. It was a little dazzling, but it made Liu Chen's eyes narrow slightly. The first thing that caught his eye was a yellow glass ball with a red star mark on it. 1-star dragon ball, a treasure from a mysterious world. Gathering 7 of them will summon a dragon and grant a wish. Note: this seemingly powerful treasure is not worth mentioning until all 7 are collected. Cough. With a dry cough, Liu Chen felt helpless as he felt the irony in the message. Then, he looked at the thunder god with suspicion. If his guess was correct, this silly guy must have made too many wishes, or wishes that were difficult to fulfill at once. After all, it was the first time that an unrealistic dragon ball was opened like this. As for collecting all 7, sorry, Liu Chen was skeptical. The contents of the jar were all random, and they came from all realms. To collect all 7 dragon balls. This is more than just a simple difficulty. However, despite thinking about it, Liu Chen still had a smile on his face and said with a smile. Congratulations, you got something nice. Good stuff. In a rare excitement, Thor wiped his sleeves and quickly grabbed the yellow dragon floating in the air. Then, in front of Liu Chen's astonished eyes, he touched it and bit it with his teeth. Well, his face froze slightly, and Liu Chen's mouth twitched. It was only then that he remembered that Thor's IQ seemed to be out of proportion to his combat power. This was not to say that his IQ was negative. It was because Thor would never use his IQ to solve a problem that he could solve with a hammer. And, in the past, this guy was always very reckless. Therefore, the word, stupid, is sometimes associated with him. Of course, when he is smart, Lei Shen should not be underestimated. However, compared to his smartness, he is biting the dragon ball and showing stupidity, which makes Liu Chen feel very shocked. At this time, as if he noticed Liu Chen's strange eyes, Lei Shen put away his sleeves and took the initiative to ask. What's good about this? It's called the 1-star dragon ball. If you can collect 7 of them, you can summon a dragon and make a wish come true. Hearing Liu Chen's voice, Thor was slightly stunned. Making a wish come true sounds good. But why? He felt a little strange. However, at this moment, a suspicious voice suddenly sounded in the store. You said, collect all 7. Liu Chen nodded and looked at the Hulk Dr. Banner who stood up not far away. His face showed a rare embarrassment. What could he think of? The doctor could naturally sense it. However, it was indeed a bit embarrassing. 7 gems, it seemed that it was not an easy task. Moreover, only 6 of the Infinity Stones were collected, and they were searched in this universe. Forehead. Thor is already holding the Dragon Ball and rubbing his scalp. I said, man, are you sure this store is reliable? It should be reliable, but you seem to have a little accident. The Hulk Banner took the initiative to maintain the store with a rare twitch of his mouth. After all, he did get good things here. Who would have thought that Thor would get such a broken thing as soon as he came? At this time, Liu Chen also selectively ignored Thor's words and turned his eyes to another thing in the golden light not far away. Fortunately, the next thing is not bad. It didn't hit him in the face. Thinking of this, Liu Chen had already taken out another thing from the golden light. A stone, a very inconspicuous stone. Holy Thunder Stone, a special stone from a magical world that can store thunder and swallow lightning. Note: if a person who practices thunder possesses it, he or she can integrate it into the body and increase the power of thunder by 30% or even 60%. Call. Taking a deep breath, Liu Chen secretly smacked his lips at this thing. This is not to say that this stone is so terrible. But, if this stone falls into the hands of Thor, the god of thunder, the scene would be quite wonderful. After all, Thor is known as the god of thunder, and he is best at controlling lightning. And now, such a stone that can make his strength soar by several times has appeared like this. It must be said that this is a small turn of events. Thinking of this, Lu Chen's mouth corners slightly raised, and he pushed the black stone in his hand over. Don't tell me, after a broken bead, the next thing is another broken stone. Resisting the twitching of his eyes, Thor looked at this ordinary stone and felt unwell. Well, he believed that this shop was indeed mysterious, even a little scary. After all, he felt a little depressed at the moment. But the question was, what the hell was this thing? What he wanted in his heart was to resurrect his parents and brother. Then, by the way, strengthen your strength. Of course, if there are other things, it would be even better. But Lu Chen didn't know about this. Otherwise, he would look at the thunder god as a fool. As I said, a strong desire, a strong desire. However, this fool was greedy and wanted so many wishes at once. No wonder he could even come up with the Dragon Balls. He asked for it all. Of course, Lu Chen definitely didn't know what Thor was thinking at the time. Now, looking at Thor, who looked disgusted and didn't want to take over the Holy Thunderstone, Lu Chen sighed. The real good stuff is right here, and you still look down on it, tisk tisk. Lu Chen slowly retracted his arm in a state of indescribable gloating. However, just as he was about to retract his arm, Shua, an invisible hand, grabbed Lu Chen's Holy Thunder Stone. Even if it is a broken stone, it was opened by me, Thor said proudly, and started playing with the black stone in his hand. But at this moment, Thor's eyes suddenly fixed. What is this? Thunder God's eyes were already attracted by the stone in his hand as he exclaimed. He looked up and saw that the black stone in his hand was actually emitting lightning. Zira, Zira. Threads of countless arcs lifted the entire stone from Thor's hand. Holy Thunder Stone, if you are a being that is good at thunder, if you confuse it, the power of thunder may be increased by 30% to 60%. Really, in a rare moment of excitement, the thunder god's eyes widened a little. Didn't you feel it? Looking at the arcs of electricity that continued to surge out of the stone and spread toward Thor's palm, Lu Chen said strangely. Well, Thor's face froze slightly, and he was also stunned. Indeed, he felt it now. The endless thunder was constantly pouring into his body. Power, power that can be seen with the naked eye. In just a few breaths, the middle-aged man was already shrouded in white lightning, and his eyes were constantly emitting lightning, as if he was about to awaken. If Thor's body was not somewhat out of proportion to him at the moment, the once famous thunder god would have been reborn. However, even so, click, click, click. Along with the piercing sound, countless lightning bolts turned into silver snakes that rolled wantonly in the store. Seeing this, Lu Chen narrowed his eyes slightly and stepped lightly. With a bang, the entire store sank, and the arcs of electricity in the sky slowly pressed down. As this gravity, with their pupils shrinking, Hulk Banner and Thor looked at each other and saw the solemnity in each other's eyes. Gravity is not an ordinary force. At this moment, as if realizing something, Thor suddenly opened his mouth. Boom! With a roar, the Holy Thunderstone, which had shrunk several times, shot into his mouth in the blink of an eye. He patted his chest, as if he had indigestion, but Thor's face was full of satisfaction. Not bad, very good, although he did not completely digest this broken stone. No, it should be called Holy Thunderstone, but the steady improvement of his strength still made Thor very satisfied. According to his estimation, if he completely digested the Holy Thunderstone, his use of thunder would be improved by at least 50%. At that time, just by controlling thunder, he would be able to give Thanos that fool a hard time. Manager, I think we need to look at the third item. Rubbing his hands, the greasy uncle even showed a flattering smile. If I hadn't known Thor's character, Lu Chen would be confused at this moment. After all, this thunder god from mythology is so thick-skinned. Thinking of this, Lu Chen's eyes slowly moved to the last item. An egg, the size of a head, and I don't know if it was because of the golden light. The whole egg was golden. What's more amazing is that there are lightning patterns on the eggshell of this egg. Yes, lightning patterns. Zapdos, a legendary thunderbird, it was born from the place where lightning hits the earth. When a huge lightning falls from the clouds, its golden figure will also emerge with it. Ability. It is said to be a Pokemon that lives in thunderclouds, can manipulate lightning at will, and can continue to grow with lightning, and even feed on lightning. Note: unruliness is its nature, unruly is its only, and it is difficult to tame. It has pride and self-esteem that overrides everything. Very strong. This time it will really explode. Liu Chen's wandering eyes inadvertently fell on Thor, and he couldn't help but sigh that, stupid, people still have, stupid, luck. At least, Thor really made a fortune this time by opening such a lightning bird called a divine beast. At this moment, Thor, who was very familiar with thunder, seemed to have noticed something, and his eyes suddenly glowed. Then he stretched out his hands and held this golden egg in his arms. Manager, I can feel that this golden egg is pregnant with strong thunder. Thus, Thor licked his lips habitually and said unexpectedly, is this for me to fry an egg and replenish the thunder in my body? Well, in the rare silence, Liu Chen's eyes twitched. This guy, sometimes when he gets naughty, I really want to beat him to death. Cough. After a dry cough, Liu Chen decided to do his duty and immediately took the initiative to speak. Even I envy your luck. At this point, Liu Chen's eyes turned to the golden giant egg in Thor's arms and introduced it. Lightning bird, a mythical creature that lives in thunderclouds. Before he could finish his words, Liu Chen was suddenly interrupted by a cry of surprise. Divine beast. Yes, a divine beast. Nodding, Liu Chen emphasized again. However, the only thing worth considering is whether the divine beast Thor thought of was the same as the divine beast he was talking about. However, at this moment, crack, a very crisp sound suddenly rang out in the store. Looking for the sound, the golden giant egg still in Tony's arms actually showed a slight crack. Is this the rhythm of hatching? Thor blinked and subconsciously placed the egg on the ground. It seems that it is indeed about to hatch. On the side, Dr. Banner, the Hulk, also came over and observed. Does this mean that I am not far from owning a divine beast? Thor licked his lips skillfully, and an inexplicable smile appeared on his lips. That should be it. After a pause, Banner, the Hulk, looked at Liu Chen, who was calm and composed not far away, and said affirmatively. Since the store manager said so, there shouldn't be any big problem. But for some reason, seeing Thor's unreliable appearance, Banner, the Hulk, also had a bad premonition in his heart. However, at this time, click, 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 the eggshell slowly broke apart with a series of crisp sounds. At the same time, a long orange beak emerged from the eggshell. Screw, screw, screw. The arc spread again, but it was different from Thor's blue lightning. This time, it was a brilliant golden color. What was even more surprising was that along with the spread of the golden lightning, faint bird calls suddenly came out from the eggshell. Little guy, you can really sparkle. Thor commented with interest, and crossed his arms, waiting for the little thing that seemed like a pet to be born. Not long after, chant. With a sharp cry, a golden bird the size of 2 palms emerged from the eggshell. This is a bird with obvious yellow feathers, and its eyes are surrounded by black ring-shaped eye circles. The most noticeable thing is that its crown is made up entirely of a large bunch of sharp yellow feathers. At first glance, it is sharp, and its appearance alone is extraordinary. Just looking at this little guy, Thor, the god of thunder, glanced slightly. Obviously, this seems to be a little different from what he expected. Of course, what Thor didn't notice at this time was that there was a flash of sharpness in the eyes of this yellow bird. Especially when it saw Thor, it revealed a humane coldness. Turning around silently, in the surprised eyes of Thor and even Liu Chen and others, this yellow bird has begun to peck at the golden eggshell. Crunch, crunch. As the sound of chewing continued, the body of the golden bird seemed to grow a bit bigger. Has it grown up? Thor was stunned and asked suspiciously. It seems so. Banner nodded and looked at the yellow bird, which was now the size of a normal person's head, with surprise in his eyes. At this moment, Thor seemed to have thought of something and stepped forward. Your eggshell seems to be able to strengthen the thunder, I will try it too. Thus said Thor, already bent down. After a moment, chant. With an extremely sharp and piercing cry, a golden lightning bolt almost instantly burst out from the body of the lightning bird. Bang! Thor was blown away before he could even react. Fortunately, as the god of thunder, he was very resistant to lightning. He just dusted himself off and stood up again. You, as a pet, should behave like a pet. Thunder's face was very ugly during his rare complaints. Moreover, what made Liu Chen's eyes twitch was that Thor clenched his hands and summoned a blue lightning. I advise you not to do that. After kindly reminding him, Liu Chen said seriously. Manager, you don't have to worry about it. Don't worry, I will train the pet. Thor said this while walking towards the lightning bird that was still eating the eggshell. Actually, I am worried about you. Covering his face, Liu Chen sighed in his heart. However, looking at the aggressive Thor, he did not say it out loud. After all, with this guy's proud temperament, if he said this, his temper would be even more explosive. Of course, the consequences of this are naturally. He ate my thunderbolt. This guy is getting bigger again. Amid the angry voices, Liu Chen and Hulk Banner saw that the yellow bird had grown in the wind under the attack of Thor. In a blink of an eye, it had grown to a huge length of 2 meters. What was even more shocking was that the yellow bird, which was harmless to some people and animals, actually revealed a terrifying power. Chant! A sharp cry was heard, light piercing through the clouds and splitting the rocks. In an instant, the golden lightning spread out even more suddenly. Chapter 71. However, even so, as Liu Chen frowned, the entire store was filled with golden lightning. Not to mention seeing things clearly, even the sound was unclear. However, with the help of spider sense, Liu Chen also vaguely felt that Thor seemed to have failed. Yes, he failed. Facing the divine beast Zapdos that could devour lightning and strengthen itself, he was not careful for a moment, and it was not unfair to fail. Although he was not seriously injured. But Liu Chen saw that the holy thunderstone that Thor had just merged into his body was actually slowly flying out of the thunder that flowed out of Thor. When he saw the black stone, the eyes of the Zapdos suddenly lit up. Then, the golden wings spread out, bringing out golden lightning all over the sky. The Zapdos was already holding the holy thunderstone and flew away in an instant. Yes, away. Through the window, it turned into a golden lightning and pulled out in an instant. When the Hulk, Dr. Banner looked again, the golden lightning had already turned into an arrow that disappeared into the night sky in the blink of an eye. Dr. Banner, the Hulk, slowly turned his eyes and found that this figure was still suspended in the air by arcs of electricity. What was even more speechless was that this middle-aged man, who had already gained weight, was twitching in the air, as if he had epilepsy. As he twitched, silver electric lights also flowed out of his body one after another. Trust you. Looking at Thor's current appearance, although he did not notice any danger to him, the Hulk Dr. Banner's expression changed slightly. But before the Hulk Dr. Banner rushed to Thor, a slightly helpless voice also echoed in the air. He was exhausted because the thunder stored in his body had been drained. Well, thunder was drained. In a rare state of shock, Dr. Banner, the Hulk, also had a strange look on his face. Yes, if it's your turn to fight the Zapdos, you can suppress it, but if Thor goes up, he will be beaten. Liu Chen explained, trying to suppress the smile on his face. Why? The Hulk, Dr. Banner, asked in confusion. Natural restraint, is that an explanation? As he spoke, Liu Chen lifted his palm and, using gravity, slowly lowered the thunder god's body to the ground, and continued. Although Thor is the god of thunder and can control thunder, that lightning bird was born from thunder and can even devour thunder to strengthen itself, so, you know. Raising his eyebrows, the Hulk Dr. Banner's mouth twitched fiercely. So, devouring thunder, isn't this definitely targeting Thor? Moreover, thinking of the golden giant bird that suddenly swelled up in the wind just now, the Hulk Dr. Banner looked at Thor with a strange look. It seems that this guy was too careless and fattened up the lightning bird in one wave. He could have raised his hand to suppress it, but now, thinking of the bursting sound of the lightning bird when it flew, the Hulk Dr. Banner also had a headache. Not to mention the combat power, just the speed, now there are few people in the entire Avengers Alliance who can resist it. Well, with a light sigh, Dr. Banner, the Hulk, decisively lifted up the back of Thor's neck, who was lying on the ground, and prepared to leave. If they didn't leave now, there would probably be chaos outside. And more importantly, Dr. Banner has now thought of the gloomy faces of Captain America, Natasha and others. He came to this mysterious shop and brought Thor with him. If nothing had happened, it would be nothing. But as luck would have it, something happened in the end. Moreover, a somewhat scary, divine beast was let go. Just thinking about it, Dr. Banner felt his scalp tingling. And at this moment, as if seeing the headache on Dr. Banner's face, a kind reminder suddenly echoed in the air. Although the lightning bird is ferocious, it does not like killing and prefers to stay in the land of thunderclouds. Thanks, manager. After hearing this reminder, Dr. Banner's mouth was slightly raised, revealing a relieved smile. It's good that he doesn't like killing. If he destroys and discharges electricity as he wants, it will cause a big trouble. Now, with the explanation of this mysterious manager, Dr. Banner also put down the big stone in his heart. Soon after, Dr. Banner, the Hulk, carrying Thor on his shoulders, strode towards the Avengers' headquarters under the cover of night. As for the lightning bird, sorry, he couldn't control it now. Now, the best option was to go back and get scolded. Of course, at this time, Banner didn't notice the teasing look of the store manager behind him. Tisk tisk, this shouldn't be my fault, right? Liu Chen grinned, but there was no guilt on his face. Although, at that time, if he wanted to stop it, he could also use the mysterious power to block the entire store and prevent the lightning bird from rushing out. But why did he do that? This would not do him any good. Moreover, more importantly, he saw a trace of spirituality in the eyes of the lightning bird. Yes, spirituality, no less than human wisdom. If Liu Chen's guess is correct, the lightning bird must have awakened when it was in the golden giant egg. Not only did it hear the conversation between Liu Chen and others, but it also keenly captured the fried eggs in Thor's words. In this way, it can explain the hostility that flashed in the depths of its eyes when it saw Thor for the first time. If this is true, then Thor has lost not only his wife, but also his army. Amidst his rare sigh, Liu Chen's mouth also raised a hint of playfulness. Originally, the lightning bird still had a certain hope to become his right-hand man, but now, that lightning bird has deeply remembered Thor. Not to mention becoming a right-hand man, it is good enough to spit out a lightning bolt at the first sight. Is this the tragic price of speaking without thinking? With a teasing smile, Liu Chen looked at the attribute panel. After a moment, looking at the score column that had climbed to 93, Liu Chen also slowly exhaled. One more guest will be enough. Thinking this way, Liu Chen raised his footsteps and walked towards the depths of the basement. The night is very dark. Liu Chen is already alone in the basement. It is worth mentioning that for the so-called practice, Liu Chen used the power of the gravity fruit to add gravity to the entire space. 1, 2, 3 times, until, with a click, Liu Chen's knees made a crisp sound. Liu Chen exhaled deeply, his face solemn. The legendary top-grade practice place, the gravity room, can effectively polish the body and further strengthen the body. In this regard, Liu Chen only wants to say that some legends are really up. For example, if he could not freely control gravity in his artificial gravity room, the sudden pressure alone would be enough to make his 5 internal organs unable to bear it. It was like coming from all directions, unavoidable and unpreventable. If he was not careful, even he would be seriously injured. Therefore, at this time, if you don't have superb medical technology, don't play with these. Some of them are really not a joke. Of course, for him who can freely control gravity, these are still acceptable. Moreover, at this time, Liu Chen couldn't help but feel a little grateful for the protection from the mysterious power of the shop. With this mysterious power, even if he made a mistake, the mysterious power was enough to protect his body. In this way, Liu Chen could practice steadily in this gravity room. As for the so-called practice, it is not as cumbersome as imagined. It is enough to skillfully use some martial arts taught by the 6 teachers in the world of the strongest disciple in history, Qian Yi, in the gravity room. After practicing several sets of martial arts, Liu Chen took a look at the attribute panel, and his mouth curled up slightly. Physical fitness, strength, and even agility have all increased a little. Although not much, it is growing steadily. At this time, the gravity was lifted, and Liu Chen felt that his body seemed to be a little lighter, and his body was more coordinated. Clenching his fists, Liu Chen could even feel a more powerful force surging. Call. Taking a deep breath, Liu Chen suppressed the thoughts that were rising in his heart. Now, although he is not weak, he is just like that, not worthy of pride. Moreover, such steady growth is only because his physical fitness has risen too fast, and now he has effectively polished it, so he has made such progress. If he practices like this for a long time, although he will make great progress, it will never grow at a speed visible to the naked eye every day. Strength is, after all, the product of accumulation. The occasional surge is just because of the sudden explosion of accumulation. Of course, in this Marvel universe, many people suddenly become stronger without reason, except for this. Such existence, although terrifying, has more or less shortcomings. Or there is an invisible big hand behind such existence. Like the Emperor of the universe, Thanos, there is a big man behind him. And Liu Chen just sighed slightly. In another world, he would have liberated his nature long ago. But he came to this world. Liu Chen's scalp tingled when he thought of the giants hidden in the depths of this world. He couldn't afford to offend them, so many of them. Keeping a low profile was the way to go. And more importantly, as a demon merchant, although he was harvesting souls. But Liu Chen really couldn't sell the jars in a high-profile manner. One reason was that ordinary people were difficult to train. Even if he gave them treasures, the final harvest would cause him to lose money because of the unqualified souls. The so-called loss outweighs gain, nothing more than this. The second reason was that he only had 16 jars a day, and he would have to wait until the next day if he sold them all. Although he couldn't sell them all now, if he sold them in a high-profile manner and made everyone know about it, he would earn points, but it would be difficult to send the jars to people who were worth training. In this case, it would be better to let nature take its course like now. Occasionally, an ice girl or an ordinary person like Alger would come, which could be regarded as one or two opportunities he gave. If the results were good, he could seriously plan it in the future. Just as Liu Chen was lost in thought, the Avengers' headquarters. Meeting room. Step, step, step. Accompanied by the sound of hurried footsteps, the empty conference room finally welcomed one figure after another. I told you not to go, not to go. In the rare coldness, as if suppressing something, Natasha's face was covered with a layer of frost. The Hulk, Dr. Banner, who was the first to sit down, was speechless. It would be fine if it was someone else, but facing Natasha's accusation, not to mention that he was wrong, even if he was right, he couldn't defend himself. Well, with a helpless sigh, the Hulk glanced at the middle-aged man lying on the chair next to him with a somewhat stiff expression, Thor, the god of thunder, and took the initiative to admit his fault. This is indeed my fault. I shouldn't have made the decision on my own, and I shouldn't have brought Thor with me. Cough. Thor coughed dryly, raised his right hand stiffly, and said slowly, "It's not his fault, it's all my carelessness." As he spoke, as if he had thought of something, the seemingly half-dead Thor suddenly burst out with strength from nowhere, and shouted at the top of his voice, "Don't let me catch that fool, or I will rip his hair off alive. That beast actually tried to steal my holy thunderstone. Don't let me catch you, please." Cough cough. After a few embarrassing coughs, Thor was out of breath and looked like he couldn't catch his breath. However, after being in a slump for more than 100 days and gaining weight, he was seriously injured by the lightning bird. It's not that he had any injuries, but a kind of damage to his energy. It will take at least 10 days or half a month for him to recover. At this moment, as if he had noticed something, Thor turned his head suddenly, only to see a pair of very suspicious eyes. "Doctor, what's with that look in your eyes?" While asking this question, Thor also leaned back in his chair. "Anyone can bully that bird, but you can't." "Well." Thor's eyes widened when he heard Dr. Banner's words. "You don't trust me. You know, although I am a little fatter, my strength is still there. Let alone a single stinky bird, I can beat even 10 of them." As he said that, as if he remembered something, the corner of Thor's mouth twitched slightly again, and he took the initiative to add, "I just made a mistake and fell into its trap. You see, next time, I will chop it directly with an axe." The store manager said that the lightning bird was born from thunder and feeds on thunder. Your lightning is just to supplement its power. Then Dr. Banner, the Hulk, glanced at Thor's dark face and reminded him, "Don't even think about chopping with an axe. With your speed, you can't even eat dust behind that bird." Thor's face was slightly stiff, and he was speechless for a moment. According to what the Hulk Banner said, it seemed that he really couldn't beat that yellow-haired bird. "Shit, I fired a stinky bird that is definitely aimed at me." With a weird cry, Thor was stunned. Yes, he was stunned. If this is not aimed at him, then who is it aimed at? In terms of means, he is controlling the thunder, while the stinky bird devours the thunder. In terms of speed, he is flying with an axe, but the stinky bird has wings on its back, and when it spreads, it is like a flash of lightning. Although, there may be little difference. But one relies on external forces, and the other relies on oneself. Even a fool can understand that there must be some gap here. At least, in terms of flexibility, he is really not as good as the stinky bird. Thinking of this, Thor's face darkened, and he said bitterly, "Aren't you kidding me?" Seeing Thor wilting all of a sudden, the Hulk Dr. Banner's mouth twitched. Thor not only gained weight, but his personality also changed a bit. In the past, even if he knew this, he would still hold the axe and shout arrogantly. Well, somewhat helpless, Dr. Banner, the Hulk, also sighed. Time really changes a person, and a tragic defeat is more likely to defeat a person. Just as he is changing, Thor is also changing. And, looking up at the silent figure shrouded in black robes following Natasha, the bitterness at the corner of Dr. Banner's mouth is even more intense. Hawkeye, one of the elders of the Avengers, is also the only pure human being. He has no superpowers and does not rely on serum. He has come to this point by himself. However, such an outstanding hero has completely lost his soul because of Thanos' snap. With a turn, the most beloved family has turned into dust. This scene has happened, let alone dared to think about it. But it happened. According to Natasha, Hawkeye was like crazy during that period, constantly looking for his family. Even after learning about Thanos' snap, he still held the last glimmer of hope. Maybe his family was just kidnapped. Maybe his guy just got lost. One unrealistic hope after another is filled with the most sincere emotions of being a father and even a husband. Of course, until the end, Hawkeye did not find any trace of his family. Later, he also disappeared without a trace, and no one knew how Natasha found him. However, one thing is certain, Hawkeye has really changed. Shrouded in a black robe, although the brim of his hat was lifted, the whole person was cold, as if he had lost his emotions. According to Natasha, during the time when Hawkeye was missing, he turned into a Ronin, and thought about nothing except concentrating on the mission and endless killing. It can be said that such a Hawkeye is no different from an executioner. The only thing worth praising is that this hero still sticks to the bottom line of a hero, and those he kills are all those who deserve to be killed. Hawkeye. Amid the heavy voice, Dr. Hulk Banner also slowly stood up. Yes, he nodded indifferently, Hawkeye still maintaining his attitude of, "No strangers allowed in." At this time, Natasha, who was sitting in the first seat, rubbed her brows with a headache and said, "Now, the return of Thor and Hawkeye is undoubtedly a shot in the arm for our Avengers." At this point, Natasha changed the subject again and said in a deep voice, "But as you can see, with the existence of that store, there will be more and more unrest factors. First, there was the ice girl fighting Thor, and now Thor let a lightning bird run away." Forehead. Thor's face was slightly pale, and he was also helpless. He had just returned and had caused a lot of trouble. He was really out of his league. However, after a moment, as if he had thought of something, Thor suddenly spoke. "The most important thing for us now is to find Thanos." Before he finished speaking, Thor decisively shut his mouth. Looking up, Hawkeye, who had always been very indifferent, flashed a hint of murderous intent in his eyes when he heard the word, Thanos. Now, this guy hated Thanos to the core. However, at this time, Natasha also glanced at the two people who were silent one after another and said, "Thanos can be found at any time, but with our current combat power, it is not enough to turn the tables." Natasha murmured as if she was talking to herself, "We only have one chance, we don't have more chances. Do we have to wait for more people to return?" Raising his eyes, Dr. Banner, the Hulk, said in a deep voice, "Yes, we need more people." Natasha nodded, as if she had thought of something, and suddenly added, "Now, Ms. Marvel is already in contact, and Rocket Raccoon, Nebula and others are on their way back." "That's good." Hearing the word, Ms. Marvel, even the Hulk Dr. Banner was relieved. After all, in the Infinity War, 100 days ago, the entire Avengers Alliance was defeated by Thanos. It can be said that in terms of combat power alone, the entire Avengers Alliance was wiped out by Thanos alone. What's more, the Avengers Alliance is now in pieces. And now, the only thing that can support their ambitions again is that legendary hero, Ms. Marvel once guarded many planets. Even the establishment of the Avengers was influenced by her. With this legendary superhero, the entire Avengers can rekindle hope. But that was in the past. He clenched his fist and looked at the wisps of black air wrapped around his fist. The Hulk Dr. Banner narrowed his eyes slightly. I am not the same as I was before. In the rare sigh, a hint of heat flashed in the depths of Hulk Banner's eyes. If the arrival of Ms. Marvel is the hope of the Avengers, revenge, then now, the armed color domineering obtained from the store is the biggest reliance of Dr. Hulk Banner. However, at this moment, a voice suddenly broke the deathly silence in the conference room. Iron Man Tony hasn't returned yet. Thor, the god of thunder, asked in a daze. Without, Natasha was helpless, holding her chin with both hands. Unlike others, Iron Man Tony had something to worry about. Now his wife and daughter were both here, and with these two family members, Iron Man had too many concerns. Moreover, he had already paid too much for the Avengers, too much. If possible, Natasha didn't want him to return. After all, on an expedition like this, if one is not careful, there will be no trace of the body. It's okay for them to be alone, but it's not the same for Iron Man Tony. Well, shaking her head helplessly, Natasha finally concluded. Iron Man, let's wait quietly. Captain America is contacting. As for Ms. Marvel, she should be returning soon. At this point, Natasha took another deep look at Thor, who was slumped in his chair, and reminded him. During this period, try to rest as much as possible. Well, Thor nodded in a rare silence. If he didn't rest, he might die. The next day, early in the morning, the shop slowly opened its doors. Today was a special day for Lu Chen. If nothing unexpected happened, he would most likely welcome a customer who would increase his points by more than 100. With just one customer, his points would increase from 93 to 106. At that time, he could open the second pottery jar. And at this moment, as if he had discovered something, Lu Chen was surprised to find a figure curled up in the corner outside the shop. It should be a beggar. Looking at this figure, with fluffy long hair covered with mud and ragged clothes, Lu Chen had already made a definition in his mind. However, it was interesting to see such a beggar in such a prosperous area. Lu Chen smiled and didn't care much. However, just as he was about to turn around and return to the shop, a very weak voice suddenly echoed in the air. Are you the manager of this store? Manager. After a moment's pause, Lu Chen turned his gaze towards the direction of the voice. He saw that the beggar who was curled up in the corner with his head buried in his arms had raised his head. However, what was curious was that Lu Chen actually saw a trace of desire in the pair of brown pupils. No, not just a trace. It was a deep desire, like begging, and like seeing the last hope. You, looking for me? Lu Chen asked curiously. Aha. After nodding his head, the figure stood up. However, after a moment, he stumbled and almost fell, but was lifted up by an invisible force. Looking up, in his incredible eyes, the black-haired young man's hand was actually surging with a touch of purple light. Great, great, crying with joy, this young man, whose face was covered in dust and whose true appearance could no longer be seen, actually cried like a child. Yes, he cried. He was not shocked by Lu Chen's methods, nor was he amazed by Lu Chen's ability. He just cried, letting the tears flow down his cheeks. At this moment, Lu Chen also noticed the young man's wrist. It was hanging limply, as if the tendons of his hand had been cut. In the distance, one could even see scars that could reveal the bones. Tisk tisk, a man with a story. With a rare sigh, Lu Chen also opened the door and extended his hand to welcome the guest in. This is not to say that he was full of sympathy. It was because the man trembled and lowered his head, and used his chin to cut open the collar, revealing a very nice necklace. No more, no less, according to the system's valuation, the value should be around 150,000. In this case, Lu Chen naturally welcomed it. After all, this guy should have some acquaintances to introduce him to some of the rules of the store without Lu Chen telling him. With a smile, several figures emerged in Lu Chen's mind. Zor, Alger, or the Ice Girl. But the Ice Girl should not be realistic, because the heart of that woman is comparable to 10,000 years of ice. Thinking about it this way, only Zor and Alger can recommend it. As for the people from the Avengers, it is unlikely. After all, an organization like them should be eager for Lu Chen's store to close, so how could they take the initiative to recommend it? Soon, the guest came to the store. Lu Chen prepared a cup of tea and a straw. Although at this time, wine might be a better choice for the guest. But with his weak body, it was difficult for him to withstand the stimulation of wine. Can you tell me who asked you to come? Leaning on the sofa, Lu Chen smiled and said. I don't know who he is. Shaking his head, the beggar looked confused, and then he seemed to remember something and explained. That night, I was. As he spoke, the beggar's eyes also turned to the scar on his wrist, and a deep hatred flashed in the depths of his eyes. But before he could continue, Lu Chen snapped his fingers. There's no need to talk about sad things anymore. Yes. Nodding, the young man showed a hint of gratitude on his face. The pain was like hell, and just thinking about it made him feel a piercing pain. It would be better if he could not mention it. After a moment, he calmed down and spoke again. It was a young man with a black cloth wrapped around his right arm who saved me. He also said. In the rare excitement, the young man looked at Lu Chen with a bit more passion. What did you say? Lu Chen said teasingly with a slight curl of his lips. However, at this moment, he was also sure of his previous guess. The black cloth wrapped around his right arm, isn't this the ghost swordsman Zor? Unexpectedly, this kid has only been out for a few days and brought him a guest. Although this guest doesn't look good, he likes the hatred in his eyes. There is no impurity, only hatred, deep hatred. He said, if I want to avenge my parents, if I want to continue to live in this world, I will come to you. Then the young man begged again in a pleading tone. However, facing the young man's plea, Lu Chen's face was calm. He said nothing, did nothing. He just quietly sipped his tea. Seeing this, the young man's heart skipped a beat, but before he could say anything, a voice rang in his ears. May I have your name? Lancelot, Lancelot Fergus. The young man repeated it again and spoke very seriously. Lancelot. After chewing on the name, Lu Chen slowly stood up. Then, as if he remembered something, he looked at the young man and added. I can't promise to help you, but I can give you a choice. After saying this, Lu Chen opened his hand. Boom. With a burst of suction, the necklace hanging on the young man's neck broke and fell into Lu Chen's hands in an instant. Controlling objects, an application of gravity, erasing the gravity of an object, and at the same time applying reverse gravity to the air around the object, thereby controlling the object. Very practical, and also very fancy. At least, the young man sitting on the sofa looked at this extraordinary method, and the heat in his eyes became a little more intense. Not long after taking away the valuable necklace, Lu Chen also took down a jar on the counter. Of course, considering the low status of this customer, Lu Chen also said frankly. This jar will open 3 items. After you pick 2 items, you can leave the last one in the store. Well, I know, that hero told me a lot. As he spoke, Lancelot seemed to have thought of something and asked. Can you tell me who that hero is? Hero. Lu Chen sneered, but didn't say much. Maybe Zor's dream is to be a superhero. But one thing is certain, for a boy like him who is inhabited by ghosts and gods, it is not an easy task to be a superhero. After all, if he loses the protection of the Holy Shroud by mistake, a boy who can be called a demon king will also come to the world. You can think of him as a waiter in my shop. With a smile, Lu Chen casually responded and brought the jar in front of the young man. Fortunately, with Zor's explanation, Lu Chen didn't have to waste any more words. He just put the jar next to the young man, and then returned to the sofa, choosing to wait and see. At this time, staring at the pottery jar in front of him, the young man's eyes were wet again. Is this the incredible magic jar that the young man talked about? He only needs to open it and he can get everything. Not to mention the injury, even revenge is not impossible. Thinking of this, the young man slowly squatted down, and then his eyes showed a fierce look. Bang! With a crisp sound, his forehead hit the pottery jar hard. After a moment, with a crack, golden light overflowed from the pottery jar. Along with it, 3 very interesting items slowly rose into the air. Yes, very interesting. Even Lu Chen was stunned when he saw the things this time. A black suit, black, like a battle suit. However, Lu Chen was not unfamiliar with this suit. Batman's battle suit. Even without the information from the unknown, Lu Chen recognized this battle suit. Batman's suit, the special suit worn by the legendary Dark Knight who is feared by criminals. This is an extraordinary and extremely terrifying suit, not only because it is made of Kevlar and titanium and has strong defensive power, but also because a terrible soul resides in this suit. He is paranoid and persistent, and in his confusion and loneliness, he is pursuing absolute justice. If I can't eradicate evil, then my existence is meaningless. Ability. When you put on this suit, if you can't stick to the so-called justice, the soul in the suit will be awakened. Of course, this suit will also give you most of the abilities of this Dark Knight. If you can master it thoroughly, maybe you will be the next Dark Knight. Very weird. It's really very weird. Looking at this black battle suit, Lu Chen's eyes narrowed slightly. If it is really as Mingming said, then maybe soon, a Dark Knight from another world will be reborn in this universe. Thinking of this, Lu Chen looked at the haggard and thin figure not far away. Can this guy really control this battle suit? Smiling in his heart, Lu Chen seemed to have thought of something interesting, and even the corners of his mouth were slightly raised. But it's okay this way. Because of the ability of this battle suit, this guest named Lancelot is worth looking forward to. After all, even if he has justice in his heart, he will be affected by the battle suit and gradually become the next Dark Knight. Of course, if this young man cannot stick to the so-called justice, Lu Chen believes that the picture will be even more wonderful. After all, a real Dark Knight will wake up from his slumber. In this way, the value of this guest is likely to rise sharply. At this moment, Lancelot paused as he stared at the black battlesuit that was suspended in the air and had a black cloak tied behind it. It looked very cool and gorgeous. But before he could ask, Lu Chen's voice came from a distance. Compared to this black battlesuit, I hope you can pay attention to another thing. As he said this, Lu Chen controlled the gravity and crossed a distance of dozens of meters, sending a bottle of mysterious liquid from the golden light to the young man. Water of immortality. Water from the Lazarus Pond in the DC universe, also known as the Water of Immortality. Ability. This liquid can not only repair wounds, but also cure all diseases. What's even more amazing is that this liquid can also restore youth and further give others endurance, strength, speed and various physical abilities far beyond that of ordinary people. Note: too much is as bad as too little. If used excessively, it will cause mental disorders or even madness. The items that came out of the pottery jar were usually matched, and what was even more amazing was that the items that came out of the pottery jar were all targeted. For example, if this bottle of immortal water was not used to heal Lancelot's broken tendons, Lu Chen would never believe it. Of course, it was undeniable that this immortal water also had the effect of strengthening Lancelot's body. In this way, he could really wear the suit that belonged to him. After all, a strong body is the foundation of strength. Although Batman has countless titles such as Martial Arts Master, Tactical Master, Disguise Master, Tracking Master, etc., his strong body is undeniable. You know, all the physical functions of that guy have reached the limit of human beings. Now, although the immortal water has some side effects, it is indeed the fastest way to strengthen Lancelot's body. Thinking of this, Lu Chen also clenched his right hand. Bang! With a sudden explosion, the bottle suddenly exploded. At the same time, a large amount of liquid was held up by an invisible force and covered Lancelot, who was confused. It's called the Water of Immortality, and it can repair your body. During this rare explanation, the guy named Lancelot was shocked both physically and mentally. Then, wow, wow, wow. As a cool breeze seeped into his body, Lancelot's face showed a touch of ecstasy. He felt it, really felt it, a force was slowly merging into his body, like a gurgling stream, seeping into his body bit by bit. Slowly raising his hands, Lancelot saw that the several deep scars on his wrists that could be seen through the bones were slowly healing. The tender flesh was regenerating, like a willow tree sprouting, with vitality overflowing. However, at this moment, like a reminder, a voice suddenly sounded in his ears. The water of immortality can not only repair the body, but also strengthen it. He hesitated to speak, and Lu Chen could not bear to disturb the ecstasy on Lancelot's face. However, considering the pain that was emphasized in the message, Lu Chen kindly reminded him. But it hurts a bit, and it's not just ordinary pain. Quote. Lancelot was a little confused, his face was slightly stiff. But before he could ask, "Ah!" a shrill scream suddenly rang out in the store. Looking up, Lancelot was hugging the ground, rolling around. It hurt, extremely painful, beyond imagination, and more than just pain, Lancelot felt itchy, as if countless ants were crawling on his bones. His body was covered in blood in just a few breaths. However, what made Lu Chen a little concerned was that this guy didn't scream again after the first scream. He clenched his teeth, blood kept oozing out from the corners of his mouth, and although his whole body was rolling around, he curled up in a ball. Good willpower. In the rare praise, Lu Chen has noticed that his body is constantly healing, and even growing more resilient flesh. And this is the magic of the immortal water. Violent destruction, and then recasting. Repeatedly, until the body becomes stronger and stronger. Lu Chen smiled and didn't pay attention. After all, he has experienced this kind of pain before. At the beginning, the transformation of the body by the perfect serum was much stronger than this. And at that time, Lu Chen also vaguely remembered that the taste seemed not very good. Thinking of this, Lu Chen's eyes were also drawn to the last item. It was a black box. Batman's weapon box. As the legendary Dark Knight, how can he not have his own weapon box? Introduction. This is a universal treasure box specially created by a scientist in a certain world who likes Batman very much. It contains a complete set of Batman's weapons and equipment. Note: there are gains and losses. If any equipment in it is damaged, it is difficult to repair. Please use it with caution. Wow, they are all here. Lu Chen laughed dumbly and stretched out his hand. After a moment, with the use of the gravity fruit, the metal box fell into Lu Chen's hands. He lifted it and found it was not heavy, at most the weight of a school bag. Immediately, Lu Chen opened the metal box with his right hand. But surprisingly, what caught his eyes was a series of toys. Yes, toys. They were neatly arranged in the metal box. Although the shapes were very delicate, most of them had bad designs. But they were indeed toys. However, at this moment, as if he thought of something, Lu Chen suddenly stretched out his hand and took out a bat dart from the metal box. It was very light, unbelievably light, like a ball of air. But after a moment, as Lu Chen threw it into the air, wow, something interesting happened. Under Lu Chen's interested eyes, the toy dart actually grew bigger. Yes, it grew bigger. It grew bigger little by little, and Lu Chen was even more keenly aware that the air was creating ripples. When the toy dart landed in Lu Chen's hand again, it had turned into a bat dart that was half the size of a palm and had some weight. So that's it. As if he had figured something out, Lu Chen's eyes lit up. This was somewhat similar to the compression capsule technology in his memory called the Dragon Ball world. No matter how big the object is, it can be turned into a capsule and put in a box. And this metal box, no matter how big the object is, can be turned into a toy size and put in it. Of course, according to the information just obtained from the system, these Batman equipment have been specially processed before they can be compressed. If it is other things, they cannot be put in metal boxes. However, this is also very good. With a slight raise of the corner of his mouth, Lu Chen's eyes could not help but be drawn to the black toy cars, toy jets and other transportation tools lying quietly in the metal box. This should be the highlight. You know, Batman's series of transportation tools are not generally strong. Although it does not greatly improve combat power, it is convenient, and more importantly, it is really cool. Thinking of this, Lu Chen simply closed the metal box and put it in his collection. Collecting various weapons is one of his few hobbies. And a weapon set like Batman's can be regarded as his best collection. Moreover, according to his and the system's regulations, for ordinary guests like Lancelot, he would symbolically charge one or two things. In this way, Lu Chen naturally put away the last thing, the metal box. And at this moment, as if he had noticed something, Lu Chen's eyes turned slightly and pulled to a place not far away. After a moment, what came into view was a man with blood and bruises all over his body, but he was several times stronger. "Are you okay?" "Yes." Nodding, the young man showed a hint of excitement on his face. He immediately took the initiative to express his gratitude. "Thank you for your kindness." "No need." Lu Chen waved his hand and didn't care. "By the way, I will leave this weapon box in the store." As if he had thought of something, Lu Chen raised the metal box in his hand and suddenly said to the young man, "Okay." Lancelot nodded, and he understood the rules of this store. However, the only thing that made him a little regretful was that his rating in this store didn't seem to be high. Otherwise, according to the blonde boy, he should have 3 things. At this moment, looking at Lancelot's tactful face, Lu Chen also touched his chin, as if he was pondering. After a moment, as if he had made a decision, Lu Chen's mouth curled up slightly. "In the future, if you need equipment, come to this shop to get it." Having said this, looking at Lancelot's stunned face, Lu Chen added, "But remember to return it when the time comes." Although it was Lu Chen's impromptu decision to lend Batman's weapon box to this guest named Lancelot, it was not a hasty decision. After all, Lu Chen was optimistic about this guy's future. However, Lancelot was not like Zor, who sacrificed himself to become his favor. In this way, although Lu Chen was optimistic, he was unwilling to further cultivate him at the expense of his own interests. But it would be different if this metal weapon box was lent out. If you borrow and return, it will not be difficult to borrow again. In this way, the Dark Knight who may dominate the entire dark world in the future may owe him a big favor. And sometimes it is more than just a favor. If you have too much contact with a person like Lu Chen, you may fall completely if you are not careful. In this way, Lancelot's future fate is already half doomed. And this was just a matter of Lu Chen's casual words. Thinking of this, Lu Chen's mouth curled up slightly. A business that will not lose money is very good. Moreover, more importantly, although Batman's weapon box is good, it is not suitable for him. Only Lancelot, who may become the next Dark Knight, can maximize the value of this metal box. He collects it, but he will not let the pearls be covered with dust. This is one of the few moral principles of Lu Chen. "Okay, manager, if I need anything, I will come and get it." Lancelot nodded, but did not refuse. If it was before, he might have said no. But now, seeing what came out of the jar, the means of turning decay into magic, his eyes tightened with envy. Although he only has the right to use it now, it is enough for a guy like him. After all, compared to before, he is now homeless. Thinking of this, Lancelot's mouth corners revealed a rare bitterness. And at this moment, as if he thought of something, he turned around suddenly and looked at the black battle suit floating in the air behind him. "Manager, can I wear it?" "Of course, this book belongs to you." At this point, Lu Chen paused for a moment and reminded. "This battle suit is not ordinary." "Not ordinary." Lancelot was slightly stunned, but he didn't think much about it. A battle suit like this that came out of a jar must be extraordinary. For example, its strong defense. However, what Lancelot did not realize at this time was that his understanding of unusual was completely different from what Lu Chen said. Lu Chen did not remind him of this. In his impression, Batman was a very professional guy. Unless Lancelot really betrayed the so-called justice, he would not wake up on his own initiative. Thinking of this, Lu Chen narrowed his eyes slightly and took a good look at the young man in the distance who was already preparing to change into Batman's battle suit. "Let's go upstairs. There is a dressing room upstairs." Hearing Lu Chen's voice, Lancelot was slightly stunned, then nodded. "That's fine." As soon as Lancelot finished speaking, he was already holding the Batman suit and walking towards the second floor. Not long after Lancelot left, Lu Chen looked at his attribute panel. No more, no less, 106 points. A very subtle number. Because 100 points is enough for him to open the second jar. Now, should I open it? Lu Chen was hesitant in his rare silence. His spider serum had just been fused not long ago, and he had mastered the gravity fruit a few days ago. In terms of strength, he had gone through countless years of hardships that ordinary people did not know. However, Lu Chen's strength now was very vague. If you say he was strong, then he was indeed strong. After all, now half of the strong men on the entire earth have gone. In terms of strength alone, on this planet, except for Thor and the Hulk Dr. Banner, there are only a few superheroes who can suppress him, and the rest are not enough to threaten him. As for being weak, it is the big guys hidden in the depths of the universe who can suppress him with just a raise of their hands. It's a bit of a headache. Rubbing his brows, Liu Chen gradually had a plan in his mind. Opening, of course, must be opened. But how to open it is a topic worth pondering. You know, the things in the jar are affected by the inner heart of the jar opener to a certain extent. It is also because of this that Liu Chen always kindly reminds guests that they must have a strong desire in their hearts. And he, the first jar, unfortunately, was at a loss at the time. Not to mention desire, he didn't even have many ideas. There was only deep excitement. So, a lucky pottery jar came. And the so-called lucky pottery jar, it is not difficult to understand, is a jar that depends entirely on luck. Whenever he thought of this, Liu Chen had the urge to slap himself. A jar was wasted in vain. You know, the things in his lucky pottery jar, except for the training card that was somewhat useful to him, allowing him to grow from an ordinary person to a strong martial arts master, the other two things are not directly to improve strength. Well, with a sigh, Liu Chen did not have too many regrets. Now, things are irreversible, and regret is useless. Compared with this, it is better to think carefully about what the second jar will be like. Maybe, because of his current thinking, he will get something that suits his heart. At that time, he will really make a big profit. And at this moment, step, step, step. With heavy footsteps, a figure slowly came down from the second floor. Looking up, he saw a strong body wrapped in black clothes that looked like a tights. He didn't have the well-developed muscles that Liu Chen remembered, and he looked a little thinner. But vaguely, Liu Chen could see the shadow of that person. At this moment, the figure rolled up the black cloak behind him. Call, flying like colorful flags. In an instant, this figure vaguely overlapped with the one in Liu Chen's memory. Bat, hero, Liu Chen murmured, and his eyes narrowed slightly. Liu Chen was no stranger to that guy. An ordinary man, who could survive in a universe no less than the Marvel Universe. His methods were beyond the imagination of ordinary people. After just a moment, a voice suddenly came from the stairs, as if it had noticed Liu Chen's abnormality. Manager, isn't it great? Lancelot was also excited in his rare enthusiasm. Very good. Nodding, Liu Chen also praised. Well, I feel great now. Not only do I have endless energy, but... As he spoke, Lancelot suddenly clenched his fists, and a strange look appeared on his face, which was rare. Moreover, when I put on this dress, I felt as if there were some memories deep in my mind that did not belong to me. Memory. Liu Chen was a little speechless. He didn't expect that the power of this Batman suit would be revealed so quickly. At first, he thought it was a subtle influence. He shook his head imperceptibly, but Liu Chen didn't explain. After all, it would not be good for Lancelot to know that there was a consciousness sleeping in the Batman suit. Not to mention the fear in his heart, the invisible vigilance alone was not enough to make him completely integrate the power of the Batman suit. But Liu Chen didn't care whether it was Lancelot or the consciousness hidden in the Batman suit who would dominate this body next. Compared with this, he was more looking forward to the legendary Dark Knight being resurrected in this world. Thinking of this, Liu Chen's mouth corners suddenly raised, and he smiled and said, "Now you have the power." Saying this, Liu Chen threw the metal box in his hand fiercely. After a moment, looking at the metal box falling on Lancelot's hand from a distance, Liu Chen also smiled teasingly. "Open it, pick a few weapons you like, and go get your revenge." Revenge. Lancelot bit his lip and was absent-minded. Then, he exhaled deeply, and a firm look flashed in his eyes. "I understand, store manager." After saying that, Lancelot decisively opened the metal box in his hand. However, the moment he opened it, looking at the toys neatly arranged in the metal box, Lancelot was suddenly startled. Familiar. For some reason, there was a sense of déjà vu. He slowly stretched out his hand and touched each toy. A sense of familiarity from the depths of his blood made him a little absent-minded. Moreover, what made him even more at a loss was that a vague voice actually came out of his heart. "Pick it up, pick it up." Hearing these vague shouts, Lancelot subconsciously clenched his fists. A moment later, a golden toy belt was taken out of the metal box. Multi-purpose belt. This golden belt is loaded with Batman's main tactical equipment, including plastic bombs, nerve gas, bat boomerangs, smoke bombs, fingerprint box, cutter, hook gun, breathing assistance equipment. Since you have made your choice, go ahead. Suddenly a voice pulled Lancelot back from his trance. Lancelot shook his head in a daze. However, when he came to his senses, he was shocked to find that he had a golden belt in his hand. This is your first piece of equipment. Liu Chen smiled and said frankly. Put it on and let me see it. Okay. Lancelot nodded repeatedly, suppressing his doubts. He then put his hands on one end of the golden belt, then skillfully wrapped it around it, and finally buckled it. By the time Lancelot reacted, the golden belt had already been tied around his waist. Well, how did I do this? After a long pause, Lancelot's mouth was dry. He was unaware, unconscious, just like instinct. This strangeness made his heart tighten slightly. I said, this belongs to you. In the rare emphasis, Liu Chen also touched his chin and took a look at the figure close at hand. Indeed, with the addition of this golden belt, Lancelot's entire temperament has changed. If before, he was just similar in appearance, then now, even his charm is somewhat similar. However, this is what Liu Chen hopes for. The arrival of a real Batman is enough to completely mess up the world. The world has become too unified because of the emergence of the Avengers. And this is exactly what Liu Chen doesn't want to see. If those who left come back in the future, a complete Avengers will be even more troublesome. At this time, Liu Chen needs a force that can compete with the Avengers. Only in this way will the Avengers' attention be attracted and they will selectively ignore him. And more importantly, the two forces will continue to collide, and they will grow one after another, and even pursue stronger power. When it comes to power, these people, if they are not stupid, will definitely seek here. In this way, Liu Chen will naturally reap the benefits. Of course, this does not mean that this force must be a dark organization. It is also good for a guy like Batman to lead a justice organization. After all, Batman's existence is not inferior to the core of the Avengers, Captain America and Iron Man. And more importantly, Batman's philosophy is different from theirs. In other words, they are difficult to get along with, and there will inevitably be conflicts. Thinking of this, Liu Chen's mouth curled up slightly. The collision between the organization headed by Batman and the Avengers in the future will definitely be very interesting. The only pity is that the opening of the pottery jar is random, otherwise, Liu Chen would not mind summoning the entire Justice League. And now, the only thing that Liu Chen cares about is whether this seemingly immature Batman can win his expectations. If he can, it is good, but if not, Liu Chen must consider other things. In the final analysis, it's like raising a poisonous insect. If you don't cultivate an opponent, some people's growth rate will be much slower, or even stop growing. Of course, Liu Chen is not in a hurry now. Nowadays, with the great enemy Thanos, the entire Avengers alliance is still relatively active. Captain America, Natasha, the Hulk, and Thor have all been here one after another. At this moment, at the Avengers headquarters, a cold figure leaned against the wall with an expressionless face. He seemed to be in deep thought, or reminiscing. Hawkeye. With a gentle call, a very burly green figure was walking slowly towards them from afar. Hawkeye nodded slightly, and a rare smile appeared on his face. Perhaps, for him, the only thing that could make him show other expressions now were his companions from the Avengers. At this moment, as if he had thought of something, Hawkeye suddenly spoke. Can you show me your armament hockey? Armament hockey. After a slight hesitation, Dr. Banner, the Hulk, nodded in the distance. It must be said that as a power obtained from that mysterious shop, this armament hockey really earned him enough face. Even Natasha, who never cared about these things, studied it. It's just a pity that without that parchment, even if Dr. Banner, the Hulk, knew the method of cultivation, he couldn't teach it. And, more importantly, according to Natasha's analysis, armament hockey is not that strong. What is really strong is his physique. It is his extremely terrifying physique that can evolve into the black airflow that seems to be as heavy as 1,000 pounds. Click, click, he clenched his fists, making a continuous sound like bones crackling. Then, as Hawkeye's pupils shrank, wisps of black air continued to flow out from the right arm of Dr. Banner, the Hulk. It's incredible. Even though it wasn't the first time he saw it, Hawkeye was shocked. It was like a black film wrapped around his arms. It gave him an indestructible feeling. What's more terrifying was that when the armament hockey completely wrapped around the Hulk banner, a real pressure made Hawkeye's breathing pause. Very strong, really strong, and is this the power given by the mysterious shop? Hawkeye was rarely silent, and a trace of longing appeared in his eyes. At this moment, an angry voice suddenly came from a distance. You fool, showing off again. If that yellow-haired bird hadn't taken my holy thunderstone, I would be the one standing there right now. There were more complaints. From a distance, a middle-aged man staggered over with a bottle of wine in one hand. Didn't Natasha tell you not to drink anymore? With a frown, Banner said in a deep voice. If I don't drink it, I can't swallow this breath. Just let me drink a sip, a sip. Thor looked nervous, and when he saw that the woman was gone, he suddenly took another sip. At this time, even Thor had to admit that Natasha had become more charming after using some kind of anti-aging pill. Most people couldn't resist it. But for the elites of the Avengers, it wasn't that they couldn't resist it. They just couldn't afford to offend her. They really couldn't afford to offend her. Can you imagine a beautiful woman who looks at you coldly? Well, with a helpless sigh, Thor wanted to leave this place. At this moment, Thor's eyes suddenly lit up, and he took 2 steps instead of 3. He came to Hawkeye and Dr. Banner, the Hulk, and whispered. I say, brothers, do you want to go to that mysterious shop? Quote. His face froze slightly, and Dr. Banner, the Hulk, really wanted to slap to death this wretched fat man who was leaning close to him. Natasha had warned him not to go, because there was something wrong with that store. Thor, this guy, still didn't give up. However, at this moment, Thor, as if aware of Dr. Banner's thoughts, suddenly curled his lips and said, Humph, Dr. Banner, you have obtained the armament hockey, and your combat power has skyrocketed, but I, after all the hard work, found a holy thunder stone, but it was lost by that yellow-haired guy. It seems like it's your fault. The corner of his eye twitched, and Dr. Hulk Banner said truthfully. Okay, my bad, but I have to admit, that store has a lot of good stuff. Look at Natasha. The first time she went there, she got a rejuvenating pill. The first time you went there, you got an armament hockey, and the first time I went there, I got a holy thunderstone and a divine beast. Speaking of this, Thor couldn't help but mutter in a low voice. Although that beast ran away and stole my holy thunderstone. So, what do you want to say? With a sigh, Dr. Hulk Banner said helplessly. I just want to say that we got some good stuff the first time we went there. At this point, Thor suddenly slapped Hawkeye on the shoulder and laughed and added. We all got some good stuff, so how can we not let Hawkeye get one good thing? I don't need it. Hawkeye frowned and refused. Although he was curious about the mysterious shop, he was more concerned about Thanos than curiosity. Revenge was the only reason for him to stay here. Don't reject it so quickly. Thor grinned and laughed. Then he put his head close to Hawkeye's ear and said in a low voice. That shop seems to hold the means of resurrection. Crack, was like a thunder, suddenly exploding in Hawkeye's mind, and his whole body was shocked. Are you telling the truth? His breathing became heavier, and Hawkeye stared at Thor. Of course it's true. Thunder God Thor was serious after returning to his normal state. Not only did he want to revive his relatives, but so did Hawkeye. Their common obsession made them resonate with each other. As a result, God Thor took the initiative to remind him. One reason was to give Hawkeye hope. The second reason was that he wanted to verify something. With this in mind, God Thor suddenly turned his gaze to Dr. Banner, the Hulk, not far away, and said teasingly. If you don't believe it, you can ask Dr. Banner. Hearing this, Hawkeye slowly turned his gaze towards Dr. Banner. After a moment, Hawkeye let out a heavy breath as he looked at Dr. Banner, who looked helpless but nodded slightly. Go. Good. Thor laughed and was very satisfied. It was better for 2 people to be scolded than for 1 person. Of course, this was also because, looking at the expression of the Hulk Dr. Banner, he no longer expected this big guy to go. In this case, only he and Hawkeye could go. However, What Thor couldn't understand was how the Hulk, who frightened countless criminals, could be so afraid of a woman. Just when Hawkeye and Thor were having a rare agreement, Lu Chen sent Lancelot away in the devil's shop. Next time when I come back, this guy will probably bring me an unexpected surprise. Squinting his eyes, Lu Chen smiled calmly as he looked through the window at the figure carrying a backpack and going away. Some things are destined. His eyes were full of hatred, but his heart was blocked by Batman's battle suit. Isn't this contradictory and complex emotion the growth of a Batman? If Lu Chen remembered correctly, the young Batman was robbed by gangsters when he passed a path on his way home from watching a movie. Then the gangsters brutally killed his parents in front of the little Batman. Lu Chen didn't pay much attention to Lancelot's experience. But through clues, Lu Chen felt that the two should be similar. In this way, the common experience made this guest summon Batman's unique battle suit. Smiling, Lu Chen also took a cup of coffee and slowly returned to the sofa on the second floor. At this time, if he raised his eyes, he could suddenly find that there was a black pottery jar on the table that was sparkling like crystal. The pottery jar was not big, but it attracted all of Lu Chen's attention, so that Lu Chen's eyes couldn't stop flashing. If I can, I really hope that I can get that thing. His heart trembled for a rare time, and Lu Chen couldn't help but look forward to it. If there was anything else that could arouse his expectations at this time, it would be that thing. Thinking of this, Lu Chen slowly exhaled a breath of turbid air and suppressed the tension in his heart. After spending most of the night, he finally thought of such a fun and practical thing. He couldn't let him down. Thinking of this, Lu Chen slowly raised his arm. After a moment, feeling the cold texture of the pottery jar, he suddenly exerted force with his right hand. Kacha, accompanied by a crisp sound, golden light suddenly overflowed. At the same time, three things were also imprinted in Lu Chen's eyes. With a slight curl of his lips, Lu Chen had already picked up one of the things. A mask, and it was a very familiar mask, also known as the Ghost Mask. Ghost Mask Ninja Core, a magical mask that can summon a core. Ability: it can summon the legendary ninja core. Their appearance is similar to that of ordinary Japanese ninjas, but they are stronger than ordinary ninjas. They master various ancient ninja tactics and weapons and equipment, have high strength and sharp skills and combat power, and have various spy and assassin abilities. They are proficient in karate and qigong, as light as a swallow, and are good at long-range attacks and close combat. Different from the samurai core mask opened by the Ice Girl, Lu Chen opened another unique core mask. However, Lu Chen was very satisfied with this. He really wanted a good core in his heart that he could wave his arms. And just in case, the ghost mask that could summon the samurai core opened by the Ice Girl not long ago could meet his needs. Therefore, Lu Chen also subconsciously wanted to open such a mask. After all, there are as many as 9 ghost masks that can summon the core. And now, the pottery jar perfectly meets his needs. More importantly, this one is still a mask that can summon the ninja core. You know, although the Ghost Army has its own strengths, Lu Chen likes the Ninja Army the most. Not for anything else, but because this army can master various ancient ninja tactics and weapons and equipment. Although the individual combat power may not be as good as other armies, the ability to master weapons and equipment has already made this army's status far superior to other armies. Moreover, this is not to mention that the ninjas of this army are smart and can understand people's intentions. Pursing his lips, Lu Chen also put this mask on his face with one hand. After a moment, as if he understood something, Lu Chen's feet shook. Boom! As darkness surged, black figures emerged from all around Lu Chen. They slowly raised their eyes, as if they had noticed Lu Chen's gaze. The ninjas slowly bent down and then knelt on one knee. Although it was silent, an invisible might spread out in an instant. Very good. With a rare laugh, Lu Chen slowly stood up, his robes fluttering in the invisible wind and waves. He had to say that he was really satisfied. He was very satisfied with such a legion that could understand his thoughts. Moreover, more importantly, with a wave of his hand. Boom! In the distance, a metal box lying on Lu Chen's desk suddenly flipped open. At the same time, a bunch of black toy-like objects flew out in an instant. However, just as they left the metal box, these toys actually swelled up in the wind. In just a moment, several huge creatures filled Lu Chenuo's huge room. Bang, bang, bang. With a heavy thud, the huge object landed on the ground. At this time, looking up, one can suddenly find that a number of exquisitely shaped and extremely cool transportation props have quietly appeared on the ground. These are precisely the Batmobile and other elite equipment from the Batman weapon box. Go and give it a try. While speaking out, Liu Chen was also looking forward to the brilliant performances of these ninjas. Not long after, boom, boom, boom. With a very rhythmic roar, in front of Liu Chen's satisfied eyes, a ninja had already ridden on Batman's motorcycle. And this motorcycle was constantly pulling out flames. If this ninja hadn't deliberately suppressed it, Liu Chen believed that this Batman motorcycle would have already dived. At the same time, on the other side, as if unfamiliar, another ninja sitting in the Batman car seemed a little slow. However, the good news is that this slowness is only temporary. After just a short while, Liu Chen noticed that the lights in the cab of the Batman car were on. And more importantly, the two wheels at the back of the Batman car also made a friction sound with the ground. Tisk tisk. Licking the corner of his mouth, Liu Chen showed a satisfied look on his face. He originally thought that the equipment in the Batman weapon box could only be used by the little guy named Lancelot, but he didn't expect that these ninjas could actually control it. Although their control was a little awkward, they were indeed controlling it. And what this meant was self-evident. A legion with the most elite tactical equipment, hidden in the night, suddenly appeared. Not only did they come and go without a trace, but even if they died in battle, they would only turn into a wisp of black smoke and be reborn after a while. This kind of undead legion that only existed in legends was exciting just to think about. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.